My husband's explosive rage over my gaming computer wasn't about money. It was the first crack in a perfect marriage that would expose his pregnant mistress and a shocking web of lies so twisted I couldn't believe the monster I'd been sleeping beside. This isn't just another cheating story. It's a psychological thriller that unfolds in real time as I discovered the stranger sleeping beside me had constructed entire parallel realities, convincing not just me, but multiple women that we were living completely different versions of the same relationship. What happens when the man you trusted turns out to be a carefully crafted fiction? Stay with me until the end to witness how I reclaimed my life from a master manipulator and discovered a strength I never knew existed beneath the rubble of his deception. My husband's face twisted with rage when I spent my own savings on a gaming computer, the first crack in our perfect marriage that would reveal his pregnant mistress and the elaborate double life he'd been hiding behind closed doors. From the outside, Joe and I had the perfect life. Both 33, each earning around $200,000 annually in our respective fields, me as a senior software developer, him in finance. We owned our home outright, technically my grandmother's house that I'd inherited, and lived completely debt-free. We saved nearly half our combined income and had what I thought was a fair financial arrangement. Most money went into joint accounts, but we each had a $1,500 monthly fun money allowance to spend however we wanted, no questions asked. This system seemed to work beautifully for years. Joe typically spent his allowance as quickly as it arrived, primarily on golf, expensive clubs, tournament fees, weekend trips with buddies. Meanwhile, I gravitated toward more frugal hobbies like running and baking. Consequently, my fun money account steadily grew month after month, a quiet testament to our different approaches to life. 4 years of saving had swelled my personal account to over $50,000 when Gaminga passion from my college days called me back. I spent weeks researching the perfect setup: a custom-built PC with top-tier graphics, a handcrafted ergonomic desk, and a premium chair designed for marathon sessions. The $5,000 price tag represented just a fraction of my savings, well within our agreed-upon boundaries. I pictured Joe's reaction as I showed him my purchase, perhaps a playful eye roll, or a joke about my geeky side, never imagining it would trigger the collapse of everything I thought I knew about us. Instead, his reaction left me stunned. The moment I mentioned my purchase, his face contorted with rage. $5,000? Without discussing it with me first? That's financial infidelity, he shouted, pacing our kitchen like a prosecutor before a jury. His vehemence seemed wildly disproportionate, almost as if he'd been waiting for an excuse to erupt. But it's my fun money, I countered, confusion clouding my initial excitement. We've always agreed that's discretionary spending. You just bought new golf clubs last month for $3,000. That's different, he snapped, not meeting my eyes. Golf is social, professional. This is just wasteful. Something about his reaction felt off, like watching an actor perform a scene with too much intensity for the script. This wasn't about money. We had plenty. It wasn't about the gaming setup. He had never expressed any issue with gaming before. As he continued his tirade about responsible spending and consulting each other on major purchases, an unsettling realization began to form. This outburst was a symptom of something deeper, something hidden. That night, as Joe slept soundly beside me as if nothing had happened, I stared at the ceiling, replaying not just that conversation but dozens of recent interactions that suddenly seemed tinged with a strange new distance. The gaming computer had inadvertently pulled back the first thread of what would turn out to be an elaborately woven tapestry of deception, a tapestry I had been living inside, without ever noticing the pattern. No one expected that my husband's bizarre reaction to a computer purchase would be just the beginning of a profound unraveling. In the days that followed, Joe's criticism shifted from my spending habits to virtually every aspect of my existence. His sudden change blindsided me completely. "That blouse makes you look terrible," he sneered one morning at the very silk top he had picked out in Milan, insisting I buy it. The man who once called this exact garment perfect now couldn't hide his disgust. Something didn't add up either. My memory was failing, or the loving husband I thought I knew had been wearing a mask all along. Each day brought a new, contradictory complaint. If I dressed casually, I wasn't trying anymore. If I dressed up, I was trying too hard to get attention. The shifting goalposts left me constantly off balance, questioning my own perception. Was I truly failing in all these ways, or was something else happening? The inconsistency of his criticism planted the first seed of suspicion in my mind. This wasn't about me at all. Determined to test my theory, I devised what I later called Operation Perfect Wife. On a Friday evening, I prepared an elaborate 5-course dinner featuring his favorite foods, paired with an expensive bottle of wine from our collection. I styled my hair the way he had once said he loved, wore a dress he had bought me for our anniversary, and even applied makeup according to a tutorial he had once forwarded me with the note, "This look is fire." The table was set with our wedding china, candles lit, soft jazz playing in the background, a scene that checked every box of his recently voiced expectations. The moment he walked through the door should have been cinematic's face lighting up at the thoughtful display of affection. Instead, he barely glanced at the spread before muttering, "This is just basic adulting. What do you want? A medal?" The chill in his voice matched the coldness in his eyes as he grabbed a plate, served himself without a word of thanks, and retreated to eat in his home office. Right at that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that no amount of effort would ever be enough. Whatever was happening had nothing to do with my actions, and everything to do with something festering inside him. The revelation came 3 days later during an argument that started over laundry and somehow escalated into him calling me low value because I wasn't a virgin when we met at age 21, a value system he had never once mentioned in our 12 years together. But the tragedy hadn't stopped yet. As I stood there, stunned by this bizarre accusation, he delivered the devastating 1-2 punch that shattered our marriage beyond repair. "I've been seeing someone from work. Amy appreciates me in ways you never have." Then, with chilling casualness, "If you want me to be faithful, you'll need to earn it." In that moment, I wasn't looking at my husband anymore. The man standing before me was a stranger wearing a familiar face, someone who had been methodically dismantling my self-worth to justify his betrayal. And as the shock gave way to clarity, I realized that this stranger had been living in my house for much longer than I had recognized. Right at that moment, something inside me hardened like steel. His words hung in the air between us. "If you want me to be faithful, you'll need to earn it." But instead of crushing me as he clearly intended, they crystallized my next steps with startling clarity. 10 years of marriage dissolved in an instant, replaced by a single, powerful thought: I would not beg a cheater to love me. "We're done," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I expected. The look of surprise that flashed across Joe's face told me he had anticipated tears, pleading, perhaps even acceptance of his terms, anything but this calm resolve. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. "Don't bother. You're having a baby with someone else while treating me like garbage. There's no coming back from that." The next morning, while Joe was at work, I took a personal day and methodically set my new life in motion. First call: a divorce attorney with stellar reviews, who squeezed me in that afternoon after hearing the basics of my situation. Second call: a therapist recommended by a colleague who had navigated her own difficult divorce last year. Third call: my manager, requesting a week of emergency leave. Each conversation felt like cutting another cord that had tethered me to a marriage that no longer existed. When I returned home, I packed Joe's essential belongings into 3 neat suitcases and placed them by the front door. The sight of them there, a physical manifestation of our separation, triggered a wave of grief that momentarily threatened to drown me. But beneath the sadness lay something more powerful: the profound relief of no longer needing to earn love from someone who had proven himself unworthy of mine. That night, I slept in the guest room, unwilling to lie in a bed that now felt contaminated by betrayal. In the morning, I contacted a locksmith to change every lock and security code. I visited my doctor for STD testing, then went to our bank to separate my finances and freeze joint accounts. Each practical step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, rebuilding the boundaries he had so casually violated. When Joe arrived home to find his access codes changed and his suitcases waiting, his performance of a grieved husband quickly gave way to the manipulator I now recognized. "You're overreacting," he insisted through the door's video intercom. "We could work through this if you weren't so inflexible." The words that would have wounded me just days earlier now bounced off harmlessly. His pregnant girlfriend and cruel ultimatum had inadvertently given me the greatest gift: absolute clarity about his character and my worth. The following weekend, after Joe had reluctantly collected his things, I ordered a new mattress, donated our old bedding to charity, and repainted the bedroom a serene blue that had always appealed to me but that Joe had dismissed as too feminine. Each brushstroke felt like an act of reclamation. The woman who had been willing to twist herself into impossible shapes to please an unpleasable man was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wounded, yes, but no longer willing to mistake cruelty for love or control for commitment. No one expected the divorce proceedings to move as quickly as they did. While most separations drag through months of bitter negotiations, ours accelerated at breakneck speed. Joe, it seemed, was equally motivated to finalize our separation, though for entirely different reasons than mine. His urgency became clear when my attorney mentioned casually that opposing counsel had requested an expedited timeline due to impending family circumstances. Translation: Joe wanted everything settled before his baby arrived. The proposed settlement landed in my inbox on a Tuesday morning. I expected to feel devastated seeing our decade-long marriage reduced to cold legal terms, but instead found myself scanning the document with surprising detachment. The terms were surprisingly reasonable. Joe would relinquish all claims to my grandmother's house. I would keep my retirement accounts and fund money savings, and we would split our joint investments 60/40ths in his favor. In exchange, I would forfeit any future claims related to his income or assets. My attorney called it unusually equitable given the circumstances, though she noted I was entitled to fight for a full 50/50th split. Is it worth prolonging contact with him over that extra 10%? I asked her, already knowing my answer. The freedom from Joe's manipulation felt worth far more than any percentage points. I signed the papers that afternoon, sensing that Joe's haste to resolve matters had worked in my favor. His need for a clean break before becoming a father had spared me the months of emotional warfare that typically characterize divorces. Sometimes, I reflected wryly, your spouse's affair can be a bizarre blessing. Just as the dust began to settle, an unexpected message appeared in my inbox. I know this is awkward, but could we meet for lunch? There are some things I'd like to discuss. Amy. My husband's pregnant girlfriend was reaching out directly. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity overrode my initial impulse. What could she possibly want from me? Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet at a quiet cafe far from our usual haunts. The shock that hit me when Amy waddled into the restaurant defied description. Joe had mentioned his affair only 3 weeks ago, describing it as a recent development, a moment of weakness with a coworker. Yet the woman who carefully lowered herself into the chair across from me appeared to be at least 7 months pregnant. The timeline collapsed in my mind, revealing yet another layer of deception. This wasn't a recent indiscretion, but a long-term relationship that had been running parallel to our marriage for the better part of a year. Thank you for agreeing to see me, Amy began, her hands protectively cradling her belly. I know this is uncomfortable, but there are some practical matters we should discuss. She paused, taking a sip of water before continuing with what seemed like genuine confusion. Joe mentioned you might be reluctant to move out of the condo by the end of the month, but we really need to start setting up the nursery soon. I felt my body go cold, then hot, then cold again, as her words registered. The condo? Move out? A nursery in my grandmother's house? In that moment, I realized with startling clarity that the web of lies Joe had constructed wasn't just aimed at me. He had been systematically deceiving us both, creating entirely separate realities that were about to collide in spectacular fashion. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. What condo are you talking about, Amy? I asked, keeping my voice deliberately level despite the storm brewing inside me. Her confusion mirrored my own, as she tilted her head, her brow furrowing slightly. Your condo downtown? The one Joe said you've been living in since you two separated in spirit back in 2020? She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, one hand still resting protectively on her swollen belly. He said you only stay at the house occasionally to maintain appearances for family and work colleagues. A hollow laugh escaped me before I could stop it. We never separated, in spirit or otherwise, until 3 weeks ago when he told me about you. I watched as the color drained from her face, her eyes widening with dawning comprehension. And that house isn't a temporary arrangement. It's my grandmother's home that I inherited years before I met Joe. It's mine, exclusively, per our divorce agreement that he just signed. But that can't be right, she stammered, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. Joe told me you were his GED student from the Adult Learning Center, where he volunteers on weekends. He said you struggled with addiction and couldn't hold down a steady job, so he felt obligated to help financially even though you weren't really together anymore. The absurdity of his fabrication momentarily stunned me into silence. GED student? Addiction? The elaborate tapestry of lies he had woven was both impressive and horrifying in its detail. Amy, I said gently, I have a master's degree in computer science. I'm a senior software developer making over $200,000 a year. Joe and I lived together, fully married, until he revealed your existence 3 weeks ago. Her eyes filled with tears as another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. He told me you only made about $45,000 as an administrative assistant and that you resented his success. She paused, clearly wrestling with the implications. He said your addiction issues made you unreliable, which is why he couldn't trust you with knowledge about our relationship or the baby. Each new revelation felt like peeling back another layer of a rotting onion. Did he also tell you the baby was a miracle? I asked, already knowing the answer from the fresh shock that registered on her face. How did you know that? She whispered. He said he'd had a medical condition that made conception nearly impossible. Joe had a vasectomy 5 years ago, I said, the words bitter on my tongue. He was adamant about not wanting children. I have his medical records showing the procedure and the follow-up confirming it was successful. Amy's face crumpled, the full weight of the deception finally sinking in. I don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. Why would he lie about everything? What was the point? I reached into my purse and pulled out my driver's license, company ID, and a recent pay stub, sliding them across the table. I can't explain why he created these elaborate fictions, but I can prove who I really am. I watched as she examined each document, her expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and devastation. Despite my own pain, I felt a strange kinship with this woman, both of us victims of the same skilled manipulator, both believing completely different versions of the same man. I think, I said carefully, that Joe has been living a double life for much longer than either of us realized. And I suspect we've only scratched the surface of his deceptions. Amy's hand instinctively tightened around her belly, a protective gesture that conveyed more than words could. I thought I knew him, she said softly, the statement hanging between us like a fragile, shared truth. So did I replied. The simple acknowledgement forming an unexpected bond between two women who should have been enemies but now found themselves reluctant allies in unraveling the same elaborate web of lies. The weeks following my lunch with Amy unfolded like the final act of a psychological thriller. As we parted ways that day, the look in her eyes mirrored what I imagined in my own, a mixture of betrayal, disbelief, and the peculiar shame that comes from being expertly deceived. Though we were unlikely allies joined by circumstance rather than choice, I found myself texting her occasionally, checking on her well-being in a strange twist of human connection neither of us could have anticipated. At first, the rage consumed me. How had I missed the signs? How had I lived with such a skilled manipulator without recognizing his true nature? I oscillated between fury at Joe and disappointment in myself, replaying years of memories through this new, disturbing lens. But gradually, something unexpected began to replace the Angira profound sense of pity. What kind of emptiness must exist within someone who constructs parallel lives, invents personas, and maintains elaborate fictions simply to feel in control? The energy required to sustain such deception seemed exhausting, a prison of his own making. My therapist helped me recognize that my inability to spot the deception wasn't a failure of intelligence or intuition, but a testament to the depth of Joe's pathology. Manipulators of this caliber, she explained during one particularly illuminating session, select partners specifically for their compassion and willingness to see the best in others. Your capacity for trust wasn't your weakness, it was something he deliberately exploited. This reframing gradually lifted the weight of self-blame from my shoulders, allowing me to focus instead on rebuilding. 3 months after signing the divorce papers, I hired a private investigator not to track Joe's current movements, but to verify his past. The results confirmed what I had begun to suspect. Our entire relationship had been constructed on falsified credentials, embellished accomplishments, and strategic omissions. The prestigious finance position, a mid-level accounting job he'd exaggerated. The Ivy League MBA, never completed. The childhood cancer survival story that had initially endeared him to me, no medical records existed to support it. The investigator's report read like a character study of a man who had never actually existed. Amy delivered her son in early spring, declining Joe's increasingly desperate attempts to reconcile once she discovered he had also been dating a barista from his office building. His carefully constructed house of cards had collapsed entirely, leaving him scrambling to salvage relationships he had systematically undermined through years of deception. While part of me expected to feel vindication at his downfall, I was surprised to discover that his ongoing drama occupied increasingly less space in my thoughts. Instead, I found myself focusing on reclaiming aspects of myself that had been subtly eroded during our marriage. I renewed old friendships that had mysteriously become complicated under Joe's influence. I rediscovered my passion for rock climbing, a hobby he had discouraged as too risky. I dated casually but cautiously, now performing thorough background checks with an unapologetic thoroughness that my former self might have found excessive. The most unexpected outcome of this ordeal was the quiet confidence that gradually replaced my initial devastation. Having survived the systematic dismantling of my self-worth only to rebuild it stronger than before, I found myself less afraid of potential future betrayals. Not because I believed they couldn't happen again, but because I now knew with absolute certainty that I could weather them if they did. People often ask if I regret those 10 years with Joe. The question always gives me pause. Would I choose that path again, knowing what I know now? Certainly not. But would I erase the hard-won wisdom that came from it? Also no. The woman who emerged from that marriage more discerning, more compassionate toward herself, more attuned to authenticity in others is someone I've come to deeply respect. And in the end, reclaiming that self-respect proved more valuable than any asset division a divorce settlement could provide. We're often told to fear losing someone we love, but sometimes the true victory comes in losing the person who never deserved us. This journey taught me that self-respect is non-negotiable, and genuine love never demands you shrink yourself. If my story resonated with you, hit like, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more raw, unfiltered tales of resilience and redemption. Your story matters too. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button to help others find it. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. And subscribe to join our community of resilient souls who've learned that sometimes being underestimated is your greatest superpower. Together, we're writing new endings to old stories, and I can't wait to share the next chapter with you.